I want to remind you as well that if you sign up to Rebel News Plus, you'll get a bonus segment exclusive to subscribers every week. There won't be any ads on it like this one, so sign up for $8 a month. You guys know me, I'm a big crypto guy, but I'm actually not that great at it. So I've teamed up with Bitcoin 2022, the largest Bitcoin event in the world, April 6th to 9th in Miami Beach, Florida. All the freedom you could ever need. Now, day one is industry day for enterprising Bitcoiners like myself. I need the help really badly. Days 2 and 3 are conference days, including speakers like El Salvador President Nayib Bukele. He's got a big surprise he's promised for everybody, as well as CEOs like Michael Saylor, Elizabeth Stark, Jack Mallers, Adam Back, and hundreds more that you don't want to miss. Now, the last day is the world's first and largest Bitcoin music festival, Sound Money Fest. You don't want to miss it. Last year's conference sold out, so grab your tickets online. b.tc/conference is where you go. You can pay in Bitcoin and save, or use promo code RebelNews. That's promo code RebelNews for 10% off, and I will see you in Miami. Thanks for watching another episode of Andrew Says. We are here live, or at least we'll say we're live, with Andrew Lawton and Spencer Fernando. How are you guys doing today?
I died like half an hour ago. I'm not alive. I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know what that means. Spencer, how are you?
Good.
Good. Very high energy today, Spencer. Okay, it's early in the morning. I know. I'm thanking you guys for joining me. The first thing I want to get to is with you, Andrew. I saw in Ottawa the pictures, I saw a brief video, but I haven't seen a full recollection of what happened when you got pepper sprayed. Can you review for our audience who maybe hasn't seen it what exactly happened during your coverage in Ottawa? I know we probably saw it from different angles. I just want to get your take on what happened.
Yeah, and I'll try to give the condensed version of the story, but the one thing I will draw attention to is that it happened almost at the exact moment of the famous trampling incident, where that Indigenous woman was basically pushed to the ground by a movement of police horses. And it was actually my effort to see what was happening there that really got me to miss what was happening to me, or was about to happen to me. It was in front of the Chateau Laurier. It was the day before the protest was really completely disbanded. Police were trying to push closer and closer to Parliament Hill, and had managed to do it until the Chateau Laurier, which is about 2 blocks east or so of Center Block. And police had been keeping a pretty steady, methodical pace for most of the morning, which made it easy if you were a journalist to be there and kind of be able to predict where you could safely be. And I was where a lot of other journalists were, especially news photographers. And it was at that exact moment that the tactic changed very dramatically. Police rushed forward. They broke, either intentionally or unintentionally, I don't know, that solid line that they had. That's why you had the horses go out ahead. Over near the sides, police actually started pushing people against like a wall. And that's where I got trapped, and I didn't really have anywhere to go. I wasn't able to move back. And then eventually, despite being about 6, 7, 8 feet from the front line, I got pepper sprayed directly in my left eye. And that was quite a shock, because again, I had been following every order to obey. I had been deliberately staying out of the clash that was at that immediate front line of the protesters and police, but evidently that was not enough.
How long did that take you out of commission for? Because I know you were there reporting and doing a bunch of stories there. How long did that take you out for, or did you just keep going?
Well, immediately it took me out for, probably a good 5-10 minutes or so, just trying to, like, in the field, get back to a point where I could see and my eye could open and I could work. I mean, that tweet that I put out with that photo of just like the close-up of like my giant swollen face was something I was like doing with kind of like one eye and one finger as I was trying to kind of clean my eye out. So it wasn't actually, but I knew it was important to document. But later on, I ended up having to spend a couple of hours going to the hospital and getting treated there, because it was a particularly prolonged reaction, which they advised you to seek treatment for. So I don't have an exact time, but it wasn't just about, this minor inconvenience for a few minutes, as I think a lot of people assume pepper spray is. It can actually do some damage.
Mm-hmm. And I think it can be reactivated too if you try to rinse it out later. Given like I said, the live stream coverage and the coverage from people on the ground, do you think this sort of exacerbates or, further separates people down party lines? Because you could really get two worlds if you're looking at, CBC or CTV coverage who are talking about, a lot about themselves and a lot about how dangerous and how they're ravaging the streets of Ottawa. Or if you look at True North coverage, who's on the ground, talking to people, getting stuff at the front lines. Do you think this could further separate people and there could be, completely opposite interpretations depending on who you watch?
Well, I think that was definitely the case. And just look at, I know everyone talks about the bouncy castle and the hot tub and all of these things, but I think they're important symbols of it, because to some people, you would look at the convoy and just see this big block party. And to other people, you would look at the convoy and see this radical Haiti hate fest insurrection. And again, I'm not going to whitewash it. There were some people that, of course, were not there and all just having fun. These were isolated incidents, though. The general vibe, the general atmosphere was a peaceful protest and a very fun environment for people up until the very end. And when you have people looking at that and seeing a fringe minority with unacceptable views and seeing all of these things that the media were claiming were happening there, how can you not have this confusion in these parallel societies that are unfolding?
So Trudeau calls this Emergency Act. And Spencer, I want to get your take about when they go do that second vote and then they revoke it almost immediately within a couple days. What do you think was the purpose of that? Was that just Trudeau flexing his muscles, saying, "Hey, look, I can keep going with this with for as long as I want," or is that sort of actually them saying, "Oh, we don't need this anymore. It turns out that we don't actually need it, or this is giving us blowback"? What's your take on them getting that vote and then basically taking it away within a couple days?
Yeah, I think it was a way for him to kind of impose his will on the people who, in his caucus, really, who were starting to push back. You had Joel Lightbound, who was criticizing the government, and then you had, I think it's Nate Erskine Smith, and he was kind of hinting that he didn't like the idea, but then he said he only voted for it because the government called it a confidence motion. So I think the Liberals, Trudeau was starting to feel that he was getting too much pushback, and he wanted to, kind of threaten his own people and impose his will on them, and so it is kind of a flex of power to say, I made you vote for this against your morals and against your beliefs, and now 2 days later I'm revoking it. He also humiliated Jagmeet Singh, which I'm sure he enjoyed doing. So yeah, I think it was really a power move.
Well, what about the Bloc coming in with the Conservatives on these votes? Unanimously, of course, and you've got four parties split 2-2. What do you think the strategy behind the Bloc coming in and supporting the Conservatives was there? They always like throwing a wrench in things, it seems. Sometimes successfully, sometimes very successfully, sometimes nobody even notices. What do you think the strategy was for that particular vote?
Yeah, I think with the Bloc, it's that they don't like the federal government imposing powers, right? They may not have opposed exactly what the government was doing if they had been in charge of doing it perhaps in Quebec, but they don't like the idea of the central federal government imposing things that would, influence what Quebec could do or take away the rights of people in Quebec, right? So it's not necessarily the most altruistic position for them, but that does sometimes line them up with the Conservatives who have lately been opposed to, government overreach and government infringement on individual freedoms. So kind of a relationship of convenience there, but, I think we'll take what we can get when it comes to politicians pushing back against some of this stuff.
Andrew, do you see it the same way?
Yeah, just to add to that, the only thing that I think the Bloc Quebecois dislikes more than Conservatives is federal government overreach into provincial affairs. And the last thing they want is the federal government going in and conscripting Quebec tow truck drivers, freezing Quebecers' bank accounts, all of these things. So, I have a great deal of disagreement with the Bloc Quebecois, but on this, their concerns, again, especially given the invocation of the old War Measures Act and the FLQ, I think Quebecers have a very keen awareness for just how dangerous legislation like this is.
For sure. And it's always very interesting when, enemy of my enemy becomes my friend, essentially, which I think what was happening there. I want to move on because I want to get, how highly I consider you both in the Canadian realm of politics. I want to get both of your takes on the Conservative candidates that are coming up. It's a few months away, and, people are throwing their hat in. And Jean Charest, I just remember him for his name. But if you have voted for the first time within the last 7 years, let's say when Justin Trudeau got into office, you're probably not going to know who he is. If, let's say, you turned 18 and now you're 25 or 24. What do you think the strategy is there? Is it one of these situations where you hope that he's just a fresh face in some people's mind because he's jumped around a lot? What do you think the strategy is there? Is it just, get myself back in there, get some money, get some emails? What do you guys think? Andrew, you want to go first?
Yeah, I do think there is a legitimate question of are you yesterday's candidate? Are you this guy coming back? I mean, there's a history of that happening in Canadian politics. Justin Trudeau was gone, was in retirement, and came back. And if you are just looking at it from an objective historical point of view, his most successful term in which he accomplished the most, not saying that it was good accomplishments, but the one he accomplished the most in was undeniably his last term. So I do think there is a sense of someone coming out of retirement and having a last kick at the can of sorts. As far as the translation of that to voters, I don't know. One thing that is working in his favor is that the media loves him. The media loves talking about Jean Charest. People like Jerry Butts are saying, yeah, we should all be paying attention to Jean Charest. And a former Liberal senator wrote an op-ed defending him as being a true conservative, which is great because for all of my assessments of conservatism, I go to Liberal former members of the Senate. But I think that legitimately Canadians will know the name, and if they don't know it directly, they'll be told to know it. They'll be told he's someone who's relevant. But as we see, that doesn't always translate within a leadership contest to success. Peter MacKay got that treatment. He was the one that everyone wanted. He was the one that the Globe and Mail was writing about. And in the end, he didn't even come close. So as far as whether he is going to win or not, I don't know if he's connected enough to the Conservative base or if he has enough of a campaign that he can sign up new members, convince current members. That'll be the big question in a leadership context anyway.
Spencer, how much influence do you think that some of these corporate media outlets can have in pushing somebody like him into contention?
Well, it could be quite a lot, right? Because name recognition is really half the battle, if not more, in a leadership race, especially with a lot of candidates. And so he's going to get that immediately. And, as Andrew said, right, people who don't know of him will be made to know of him. He's going to get more favorable coverage. I mean, you already see, look at the difference in coverage he's getting compared to Pierre Poilievre, right? I mean, it's quite different. And so that's going to be a challenge for Poilievre and for, more true conservatives in the race. They're going to have to fight not just against the Charest campaign, but also against the media. And they're going to spin stories as well. I mean, it just, came out a few days ago that, Huawei is saying, well, no, actually, Jean Charest wasn't actually doing that much in terms of the two Michaels. It was more about 5G and lobbying the government for us. So, I mean, if that happened to someone like Poilievre, that'd be the main media story, right? Poilievre caught lying or something like that. So Charest's going to get somewhat better coverage than other people would. But again, with the rise of independent media and with social media, it's not quite as easy for the establishment press to push a narrative and then just assume everyone's going to go along with it.
Leslyn Lewis is probably an underdog in most people's books. During the last election, she had, I think, one of the, if not the second most votes, if I'm not overall, if I'm not mistaken there. And then she settled into her position that she is now. Now she's running again. Do you guys think she has a shot at winning? Andrew, do you think she has a shot at winning? Or is this just bolstering her for further down the line? Because she's got a long career ahead of her, I think. People like her. She says a lot of good things. She has good ideas. She is one of the people that's brave enough to come out against the grain, against the party on some issues. She did that being one of the first people to speak in Ottawa. What do you think her campaign's goals are going into this?
Well, I think that the campaign goal is to win, and I think that she did have a very strong showing. She was a relative unknown in 2020, had never held office. No one had ever heard of her at the beginning, and ended up, again, with a very significant amount of name recognition and a lot of support from a lot of members of the Conservative base. Even a lot of Peter MacKay supporters were putting her second on their ballot. Now, I think that a lot would have to go right for her to come out with a win, but I should also qualify that by saying the ranked ballot makes that possible. So someone like Roman Baber, who has done a lot of work on the anti-lockdown, anti-vaccine mandate stuff, is not well known outside of Ontario. He could have a very strong showing, and then his support, if he gets dropped off the ballot, might flow to Leslyn Lewis. That's one example. If something really strange happens where Jean Charest people are really, really, really not liking Pierre Poilievre and they want to just put anyone before him, if he gets eliminated, that could flow to Leslyn Lewis as well. And she could also come out of the gate with a very strong amount of support on the first ballot with the support she has from a lot of social conservative groups who are very well organized. So there is a path to victory. It would require a lot of different things to happen. But I also think that she's starting not as an unknown this time. She's starting as someone that came out of the last leadership race unblemished, and also someone who was sidelined by Erin O'Toole. She was very high profile because of her showing in the leadership. And then after the election, she's denied a portfolio in the shadow cabinet, denied a portfolio in the conservative leadership. And she was really just shoved to the back benches when a lot of people were saying, why is this woman who's speaking for a lot of people in the party getting this treatment? So I think that there is a lot of support for her. I just don't know how much it's going to be and where it's going to come from.
Spencer?
Yeah, I think, in the last leadership race, there was kind of a lack of energy, from the base. They weren't too excited about a lot of the candidates. And so I think she benefited from that, and that she was more outspoken and she was more true to the views of many people in the conservative base than the other candidates were seen to be. And so I think this time some of that energy is with Pierre Poilievre. Some, will be with Roman Baber. And so I think she'll do pretty well, but I think she has a bit more of a challenge this time in that the energy is, a lot of the base is excited about some other candidates as well. She's not really the only one who's capturing that energy. So I think it'll be a little more difficult this time, but it'll be interesting to see, right? I mean, a lot of it's going to come down to, do Patrick Brown supporters go for Charest, and do Charest supporters go for Patrick Brown? Whether they have an official deal or not, they seem to be certainly working relatively closely together, at least in their message. I mean, you see there are people retweeting some of the same stuff on Twitter. So I think it'll be interesting to see if, Leslie Lewis, her supporters, where they go and what impact that could have on the final ballot.
Yeah, and I want to talk about Patrick Brown. Mainly his tactics is what I wanted to talk to you guys about regarding him. To me, Patrick Brown is pulling out some of the, let's say, at least 5 years old, 2016 style, sort of an attack campaign on Pierre, whether you agree with that or not. I think he's going that style a little bit, and he's got his thing with the ice rink. We all know his face when David Menzies caught him. He's got his past controversies with all these allegations. A lot of it's been retracted by papers now. What do you guys think? Do you think this, Andrew, do you think this is good, this style of campaign is going to work? He's got a lot of support in his city, I feel like, judging by the people who came out and supported him last week. Do you think this style of campaign is going to gain a lot of ground for him, sort of going head-to-head with Pierre?
Again, it certainly is dragging the perceived front runner into a fight, which means that you are seen by a lot of people as being at their level. I mean, if Pierre Poilievre didn't think Patrick Brown was worth all that much, he wouldn't bother responding to him. So I do think that, True North, for example, ran a story about the Pierre Poilievre and Patrick Brown spat. So obviously people are paying attention to it. I do think with Patrick Brown, it's kind of interesting because here's a guy who's a complete hustler in a sense of he works hard. And he went from being a backbench Conservative MP to being the leader of the Ontario PC party because he was picking up the phone, calling people. He'd be at every event. He'd talk to everyone. The problem is that he does not have, similar to Roman Baber, a national footprint. He has a provincial footprint, and he really has a regional and municipal one. So he needs to make himself part of the national discussion. And if he's firing potshots at Poilievre, that's one good way to do it.
Spencer, if he's doing this with Pierre, do you think, however much you believe his past or not, his troubled past, do you think that becomes a problem for him? Or do you think people even care at this point in, 2022 politics?
Yeah, well, I think the Liberals are looking at this and they're just watching and writing their attack ads, right? I mean, you can imagine it, right? So Pierre Poilievre becomes the leader. What does fellow Conservative Patrick Brown think about Pierre Poilievre? And then they run Patrick Brown's comments. And so the Liberals, I'm sure, are really enjoying this. And, this is where I think the CPC made a serious mistake with their 6-month leadership race. This is like, a week into it? We've got 6 more months of this kind of stuff going on, and that's going to do severe damage to the party. Whoever wins, right? So Poilievre wins, you're going to have a faction of the party that Brown recruited who are going to say, a racist one. And then, if Patrick Brown or Jean Charest wins, there's going to be a whole bunch of people in the Conservative Party, including many MPs, who are going to be quite pissed off and not really happy at all, and that's going to be a problem. So I think a 6-month leadership race was a serious tactical mistake for them, and I think they could pay the price for it.
That's an interesting point, especially with provincial races coming up in the summer. I didn't think about it from that perspective. But the last person, obviously, last but not least, Pierre Poilievre. And Andrew, I watched some of your interview with him. I think you did a great job, especially when you ask him questions about hairy things, about things that people are talking about online, like the World Economic Forum. Did you get the sense that he is much different than the other candidates? Did you get the sense that he's, going to be a different type of conservative leader, maybe leaning further towards a PPC audience that's going to like him? Or do you think that if he becomes party leader, it's going to become sort of the same thing we expected under Erin O'Toole? How do you think he becomes a leader in that sense?
It's a really good question. And I think that one of the big frustrations I've had with conservative leaders in the last two elections, Andrew Scheer and Erin O'Toole, is their inability or unwillingness to communicate conservative messages and to do it in a capable, clear, and consistent way. In the case of Andrew Scheer, he seemed to be apologizing for being a conservative. In the case of Erin O'Toole, he just abandoned conservative policies when he faced pushback from the media. So I think that a politician that's going to own their message and actually get down, if the media wants to get dirty, get down and dirty with them. And that's something Pierre Poilievre has shown a willingness to do. I've seen him push back against the premises of trick questions from the press. And I'm not comparing him to Ron DeSantis, but I do think there is that Ron DeSantis-like quality. I guess I am comparing him to Ron DeSantis then, but I think in the specific way of how he owns what he believes and pushes back against the media, there's something in that is very useful. And I think it helps them because, the existing knowledge or wisdom of conservative campaigns just hasn't been working. You need someone that's going to try and go on the offensive. So I think on style alone, that will set him apart from others. On the actual substance, it stands to be seen. I mean, this is a guy who's been a long-time conservative MP. He's got a voting record. People can look at that. He's not a social conservative. He's doing the O'Toole thing, which is saying that I believe in free votes and I believe you're a part of this party, but I'm not offering you anything. But he is also very solid on other red meat conservative issues like free speech. He was a supporter of the trucker convoy quite early on. So I think that for a lot of people, he's not just this far-right candidate. For some, he is in the media. He is someone who's relatively mainstream in conservatism, but he has a much different way of communicating that.
Spencer, when people look at Pierre, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, and they can say, he didn't speak up about lockdowns or, quarantine facilities in Canada. He's basically said end all restrictions, but he hasn't said specifically, let unvaccinated people fly. Should we expect him to come out and be a man of the people, of the entire party, and like I said, touch into those PPC style voters? Or do you think he goes more of an O'Toole way where he has all this bark, but once they get pushback, if he's in power, the leader of the party, that he's going to rescind these promises that he had?
Yeah, I think we could certainly have more confidence in him than O'Toole. O'Toole was very conflict averse. He got scared, it seemed, whenever the media criticized him, so he just tried to placate everybody and make the problem go away by basically surrendering to the narrative of his opponents. I think with Poilievre and with other conservative MPs too, it's useful to look at how their message changed when O'Toole was the leader and then when he wasn't the leader anymore, right? I mean, they certainly started talking a lot more freely about ending restrictions, about opposing government overreach. And so I think that's something to look at too. There's obviously always going to be pressure, within parties from what the leader wants, and that obviously influenced a lot of them. But I think he'll certainly be tougher than O'Toole. To a certain extent, every conservative leader does a bit of a pivot to the center, just as Liberals and NDP somewhat. Well, the NDP not really, but the Liberals will try to do that as well. You're going to be a little more aggressive talking to your party base than you would be to the public. But the idea is there's a way to do that that's still consistent with your principles, right? Maybe you change your tone a little bit, but you're not changing your ideas. What we saw with Erin O'Toole is he didn't just change his tone to be a little more moderate, but he completely reversed himself and abandoned his ideas. So since Poilievre is a better communicator, I see him being able to manage that a little bit better. And, he has been sharing a message for quite some time, especially on economic issues, that has been quite consistent. So I imagine he's going to keep doing that.
Yeah, I like what he has to say when he talks about the economy, and especially around the pipelines in regards to when he says that about Russia and Ukraine. We should be building more stuff here, flowing our oil here. I would like to hear him speak more about, gun legislation and free speech legislation. And like you said, there's 6 months. There's probably plenty of time for that. I'd love somebody to ask him about it. But when I think about gun legislation specifically, not knowing how you guys feel about this, but I can't remember the last time that some of this stuff started getting walked back. I know Stephen Harper, I believe, got rid of the, you have to call the RCMP or the OPP when you're moving your firearm, but that's since been gone back, and they've expanded the gun list. Andrew, do you think that we get to a point where we can actually start talking about, opening up our freedom of speech laws or opening up our gun rights? Do you think we get to a point in the next election cycle where that becomes a hot topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a hot topic in the election because the media will take any relaxation of firearm restrictions as being, just opening the floodgates to people walking around with, handguns and machine guns and all of that. But I do think that we are at a point in the country where we need to just stop apologizing for things that make sense from a policy perspective. I'm a gun owner. I did a documentary about firearms, so I know this issue very well as someone affected by it and also as someone who's reported on it. And Aaron O'Toole had proposed initially a very sensible approach to firearms that he completely rolled on when he was getting questions about it in the campaign. Pierre Poilievre, he has a lot of rural people in his riding. I know he has spoken out about guns. I'm going to be looking to see in his leadership platform what specifically he'll do. I spoke to Jean Charest about this because he had backed the long gun registry when he was Quebec premier, and he basically would only commit in my interview with him to no new restrictions. He wasn't committing to rolling back any of the Trudeau restrictions. So I think that you have to look at especially the prohibition that went in place in May 2020 and also the legislation the Liberals are trying to put forward right now to allow municipalities to ban handguns. I think a Conservative leader needs to say no and no to both of those.
Andrew, I think I know the answer to this, but can you explain to people why the Liberal government does a gun ban list as opposed to, regarding function or type of weapon? Can you explain that for people? I don't think most people understand the reason why we just got a mass list of weapons.
Well, the one thing I will say, and it's a bugaboo of mine, I don't call them weapons because a weapon is based on intent. A gun is a gun. A gun is a firearm. And I think that what the Liberals or what Canadians need to know first and foremost is that effectively all guns are illegal in Canada unless the government says they're legal. There's no right to bear arms. So anything that is allowed is because it's been specifically designated as such, and you have to have a license and go through that. So every gun in Canada has to be classified, and the three categories generally are non-restricted, restricted, or prohibited. And because you have a system that's based on classification, it licenses the government in a way to reclassify, which is what happens not irregularly, but what happened in that mass form almost 2 years ago. As far as the list, you're right to point out that it's not based on usage. You've got guns that were non-restricted that are more dangerous in the wrong hands than guns that are prohibited because of the way they look. And the problem is that government really in that order in council started focusing on aesthetic and look a lot more. I mean, it used to be for the longest time that you could buy a 50 caliber rifle that could shoot, 3 kilometers away. And that was non-restricted, like a hunting rifle. And then you had other guns that, shot little 22 rounds, which will still hurt and they could kill you, but conceivably they're not as dangerous as other rounds. You had guns that fire those that were restricted because of certain things. So you do need someone who's going to come in and take a sensible, bigger picture look at this instead of just catering to emotions, which is what the Liberals have been doing.
Okay, I want to do one more segment with you guys behind the paywall. If you're watching this on YouTube or Rumble, go to rebelnewsplus.com. You can sign up monthly or yearly, and you will get no ads, and you will also get this extra segment. See you guys next time. Follow True North and Twitter powerhouse Spencer Fernando, and go to his website. Thanks for watching another episode of Andrew Says. To get the full version of the show with bonus segments, go to rebelnewsplus.com and sign up now.